Welcome to Her Fund Talks, the podcast where we will deep dive into gender conscious investment and female led innovation. I'm your host, Milena Stoicheva, and today's conversation will be on a topic that is becoming even more interesting and topical nowadays. I have the pleasure to be speaking with Birka Wolff. She is a startup and investment manager at Encourage Ventures, EV, where she works to connect strategic investors with diverse startups, bringing the gap between capital and innovation closer. By unlocking this underutilized potential, Encourage Ventures is actively diversifying the startup and investor landscape. With her own hands-on experience as a startup operator or founder, Birka bridges investor and founder perspectives, helping early-stage startups navigate the difficult landscape of funding, but also support the scaling of their ideas and bring their visions to life. Over more than 8 years in the startup and investor ecosystem, she brings deep expertise and a genuine passion for tech and science-driven startups pursuing positive impact in Europe and the world. So, Birka, happy to have you. Thank you for joining our podcast. Let me start with the topic of maybe the challenges or some of the more difficult moments you've experienced and you've had. Can you describe what are the primary challenges that you see female founders or women-led enterprises face? And how do we compare that to their male counterparts, for example, or to, in general, the investor landscape?
Yes, thank you for having me first. I think it's important to first understand the depth and the range of the issue at hand to understand the systemic nature of it. So, if we think about the disadvantages women face, it's not only about securing funding, that is a small chunk of the bigger picture. So, if we think about women in leadership or being underrepresented as board members, or they're more likely at risk for poverty. We are underrepresented on a political level, especially also on a regional political level when it comes to mayors. We do more care work. We hold less partnership roles on the VC partner level. So all of these factors, of course, play a role in building a startup and securing funding. So if you ask yourself, how much time does someone have to run a business? How much money do they have to start out? Who is writing the policies? Who holds the decision power to make customer decisions in sales? So who are you selling to? And yeah, all of these challenges are part of the question. Because aside from all the challenges every startup faces in securing funding, these questions come basically on top. And that can be incredibly exhausting because you're constantly navigating and balancing between fitting in and standing out and the tension of the role you have as an entrepreneur. And I think it's so important to think about that because if you consider in Germany, for example, women are allowed to have their own bank account. I think it started in the 1960s, and to have decision power over their employment and not being a substitute to their husbands. So it's an historically grown system, especially in the capital markets, and we are judged against that gendered backdrop. And this is like, depending on your age, 1 to 3 generations away, right?
Yes.
And it's not that long ago, to be honest. And yeah, and these are the variety of challenges where then securing funding, if we pick that out, is one aspect of that, but where all the other aspects always come into play as well.
Yes, It is one of these aspects, as you were putting it, within the array of some of the challenges. But on the other hand, somehow, this funding part becomes really a hurdle at times. It really becomes the point where it's the stopping block of advancing. Maybe because it is also a question of being through it able to really launch a new product and or service. And I've seen that a lot of times women are really investing into longer life cycle type of products and services. So the funding becomes critical. Where do you see, though, this change or this difference in the funding opportunities making also an impact on the economic this gap in getting access to funding, making then economic impact on the landscape in Europe, let's say, overall economic landscape?
Yeah, so I'm a true believer that the best ideas need everyone at the table. There's this saying that I really love and that I often come back to. It's the idea you haven't had is the voice you didn't hear. So I think that we are just leaving a lot of innovative and economic potential aside currently, and we're missing out. And it's not only about the values of equality, but just on an economical level, it's in that sense inefficient, economically inefficient. And let me just paint a quick picture. So if we truly believe that all humans have the capacity to develop the same qualities and skills, and I really hope we do, and we stay within the gendered binary, and we have two buckets of men and women, and we want to choose the most innovative, the most highly skilled people for this job or for running a company that changes the future. And then we pick the best skilled person out of one bucket, the male bucket, and we put out the next skilled person and the next skilled person. So after a while, we are just on less quality than if we would pick from both buckets. And that
Yes.
is just
Yes.
statistics, basically.
It's just you're reducing the chances, let's say. Yeah, because you're becoming more and more selective with one and the other one doesn't have access, right? Doesn't even appear on the surface. You are an investor. So what motivates you to invest in women-led startups? And what are the specific qualities? Are you looking for specific qualities when you are making this decision in them or in general in founders?
Yeah. So I think from the beginning it already becomes quite clear how passionate I am about the topics, and I have the fortunate ability to be surrounded by a lot of inspiring female founders and female investors. But what I look at in diverse teams is a team with grit, with passion and vision. And this is just the basics, but another skill I really value is being open to feedback. So I see that in a lot of my female founders that they really listen, and that means they have an ear on the market constantly, but also they are ready to facilitate the high growth that they need as a leader of a startup, going through that wild ride of growth within a couple of years. And I think that's really important to face all the challenges that will come ahead. And one thing that I also think is capital efficiency is another thing that I really see in diverse startups, and that I think is a really green flag of how much they achieve with the capital they raise. And then lastly, someone with great communication skills, and that means convincing others to go on their journey, whether it be investors, whether it be their own team and a positive team climate, whether it be in sales. And that really changes the way that companies will be run in the future.
Well, very concrete, and I think good examples I had not heard about the capital diversity that actually female founders bring and that you are looking into. That's a good point to take into consideration because sometimes this is um, making a huge difference in getting the funding and getting something off the ground. Where do you see is the future? How do you envision the future of investment for female-led founders in Europe? Is there something that you would specifically recommend or suggest that we do as part of this network to support growth and more opportunities in Europe, but also internationally?
Mm. So I think we've seen some momentum in the last years, and now being in a more political and stable climate, we should be even more aware of that because there's still a long way ahead. As in my beginning statement, I think it can be quite frustrating to see all these disadvantages, but also it means we have a lot of levers to pull and a lot of things to work on. And I would hope that by initiatives like these, we challenge who a successful entrepreneur is. What do they look like? What skills do they possess? And what kind of companies do they build? And also as an investor to invest in these kind of companies that you want to see. The way the company culture is also run, the way they see purpose and impact in their companies, and to really challenge these gendered expectations also of startup leadership.
Yes. Um, I am often seeing that everyone, of course, is interested in statistics and data. And I'm seeing often that when we are looking for this data, we don't have too many sources, let's say, or opportunities to it's very clear, it speaks very clearly, but we need to somehow improve that collection. Is there something you would recommend or a format we should use or different channels on how to improve this availability of data on female run enterprises or created enterprises so that then this would trigger even a better or more open investment climate with regards to that?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. So
Yes,
maybe first off, I hope that with maturing European ecosystem, we also get maturing female-led companies that then led to more data, and that we can integrate these, especially with transparency, because in my opinion, that leads to accountability.
yes,
And I think for the investor side, the first thing to start is looking at your own data. So it can be really simple to start to look at, okay, in my deal flow, how many male-led, diverse-led, female-led teams are there? If there's none already, then you really have to ask yourself why. Then look at the
yes.
next stage of how many do I invite to pitch or talk to? And then the last stage, how many do I invest in? And I think this is like the first reflection point of like thinking about your own data and maybe starting to reflect your own stereotypes and biases, because in the end, we all have them. We all have different ones. And if we had equal amount of VC partners, equal amount in all sorts of positions, then this would probably already even out the ecosystem, but we currently don't. And so it's important to start your own work to get more aware of why you think you're choosing the best, but in the end, the numbers show that the best are always male teams. So that is somehow doesn't
Yes,
add up. And then two thoughts more. One is that data isn't neutral. So the example you just re-mentioned about capital efficiency. So do we measure the largest funding round and highlight how large funding rounds, or do we measure how far women come with the money they receive? We see that data literacy, unfortunately, especially in Germany, is quite low in the European comparison. So who really understands data? Who
yeah,
gives a framing of data?
Mm-hmm.
Who collects data? What kind of data do we have? People act as if that's neutral. And then we have to really critically ask ourselves, and I do that all the time. For example, there has been a statistic from PitchBook that in their data, 23% of exits in the US are by female only teams with almost less than 2% of the capital. So that's an incredible number. And if that doesn't convince an
It's
investor,
actually astounding to see the,
it,
I mean, the impact and the big
yeah,
difference between what's invested and the final outcome and the impact, as you were saying. And
yeah,
somehow
it's crazy.
it
And
just doesn't come forward in the
yeah, and
decision. It
if
comes
that
forward
doesn't come,
sometimes in making the news, but doesn't go beyond that, right?
yeah, and if that doesn't convince you or even lets you reflect upon your own investment strategies, then maybe it isn't the right way to go to try to convince someone with data when the issues is beliefs, identity, and things that are have more to do with emotions than with data. Because in the VC industry, we like to believe that we are getting more data driven and that it's rational, but even from which market has potential, all these are very subjective starting points, and VC just isn't subjective. And we can try to use data to start getting there more, but also in the end it's still a people's business, and it will be for a long time still. And I hope that we can build our own system in a way, and our own networks and communities that are positive, that are empowering, while also changing the system long term.
Yes. Well, this was very insightful. I have to say that I haven't come across such data, and I think I will make a note to look into that. But sometimes, as you were saying, it's like the chicken or the egg, which is the first. And if you don't have too many precedents, as you were saying, if in your own portfolio you don't have too many, you cannot come up with that data. So you have to start questioning why you don't, and start building opportunities for such a data to be created. Thank you very much, Birka. Would you have a final suggestion or advice for our audience, for our aspiring founders and investors, to give, to share?
I think maybe just for everyone to look for the community that gives you the power to face these struggles, because it is out there, and there are people who will face this with you by your side, and it will be much easier than facing it alone.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's the other, I would echo your message and even try to strengthen it by saying that we do need communities and ecosystems within which we are networked very well, because without that, we can no longer continue building, growing on our own. And I think it's the same messages for male founders and investors, but also it goes for bigger companies versus smaller ones. And really to recognize the fact that it's time for collaboration and for community building. Thank you for this very insightful conversation. Have a good day.
Thank, thank you for having me.